Number 10. P51 Mustang found. A P51 Mustang was found in a United States military base in Japan in 1946 when officers were touring a hangar. The hangar was full of Japanese aircraft that were once used for training purposes, and among the planes was a P51 Mustang. The Mustang had crashed at some point into a bay near the base in 1945. The pilot didn't survive the crash, but the wreckage was salvaged. Number 9. British planes in Ukraine. During World War II, the British sent 3,000 aircraft to the Soviet Union. They'd been invaded by Germany and were in need of military equipment and supplies. It was 1941 when the British began sending these much-needed supplies to the Soviet Union. This would be part of the Lend-Lease programs of the time, where the US and Britain would send food, fuel, and weapons to the Soviets. One of the planes Britain sent over was the P-47 Hawker Hurricane. This plane was viewed as a reliable workhorse for the British military, and they were developed in the 1930s. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, during the Battle of France, which took place between May and June of 1940, Hurricanes primarily engaged in air-to-air combat and outnumbered Spitfire squadrons with 30 squadrons to 19 at the outset of the Battle of Britain. A 2023 article from The Guardian in the UK reported that the remains of some Hurricane fighters were found buried near a forest in Kyiv, Ukraine. Someone who is part of the project told The Guardian, "It is very rare to find this aircraft in Ukraine. It is very important for our aviation history because no Lend-Lease aircraft has been found here before." The planes that were unearthed had been stripped of equipment. A theory behind these planes being buried is that the Soviets didn't want to pay the US or Britain for the planes they leased during the war. Number 8. The Greenland planes. It was 1983 when two pilots from the United States wanted to travel to Greenland to dig up P-38 fighters and some B-17 bombers that were abandoned there during World War II. The two pilots had received funding from the Reynolds Tobacco Company to put together a team of 15 people to search for the planes. At the time, it was believed that some of the aircraft were buried under snow. They were most excited to find the P-38, which was specifically a P-38J. These planes were special to the team because it was the first twin-engine plane to cross the Atlantic. The P-38J, according to the team, was the first US plane to shoot down a German aircraft during the Second World War. So how did these planes end up in Greenland? They were flying from Maine to Europe when they encountered terrible weather conditions and were forced to crash land around July 25, 1942. The crews were eventually rescued, but the planes were left behind. The project reportedly took some 12 years and $1.5 million to complete. But why did it take so long? Well, it's because the planes were buried under 270 feet of ice. After being dug out, the P-38 was sent to the United States and went on exhibit at the DeKalb Peachtree Airport in the 1990s. Number 7. The Pot Plane. The Louisville Courier-Journal reported in 1976 that two men in Tennessee were arrested for hiding $800,000 worth of narcotics in a World War II airplane that was reported to be abandoned. A man from California and another man from Kentucky loaded 2 tons of pot onto a twin-engine Lockheed Lodestar and made a flight to an airport in Cumberland County, Tennessee. The plane was discovered by authorities and the craft had information about one of the men. The two were reportedly caught hitchhiking in Tennessee and were arrested. But unfortunately, that's all the information we have available about this story. Number 6. Soplata Plane Sanctuary. It was reported that a prototype North American XP-82 twin Mustang was found in Newberry, Ohio. This is a community that's situated east of Cleveland and is home to the Soplata Airplane Sanctuary. It was founded by Walter Soplata, a Czech immigrant. In the late 1940s, Soplata worked in a junkyard and discovered that it contained various military aircraft. So he decided to bring the aircraft to his own property. Soplata traveled around the US to save planes from being scrapped. At times, Soplata would pay more than what the plane was worth being scrapped in order to save the vehicle. He would cut the planes so he could haul them on the highway. And today, his aircraft collection features some abandoned World War II planes, like a Douglas AD Skyraider and an early jet-age Chance Vought F-7U Cutlass. Number 5. the Pacific Lagoon Plains. Project Recover is a cooperative initiative that harnesses the power of modern science and technology to search for and bring home Americans who went missing in action during World War II. The aim of offering closure and recognition to their families and the nation. There are an estimated 80,000 missing U.S. servicemen who've been listed as missing for conflicts dating back to World War II. Project Recover's mission includes searching for lost aircraft, because the remains of the missing are believed to be with the wreckage. Some of the aircraft are considered abandoned due to various circumstances. One of their missions involved aiding in the discovery of 2 SBD-5 Dauntless dive bombers and 1 TBM-F-1 Avenger. These 3 planes were found in Truk Lagoon in the Chuuk state of Micronesia. Project Recover was joined on the mission by Bent Prop Project, a private organization of divers, aviators, and historians. Their goal is to find World War II service members missing in action in the South Pacific. The 3 missing planes went down during 1944's Operation Hailstone. This was one of the many important missions by the U.S. military to weaken the Japanese presence in the Pacific Ocean. Operation Hailstone was a 2-day battle that saw more than 50 Japanese ships destroyed and 230 aircraft obliterated. Out of the 230 aircraft that were lost, 30 were American, including the 2 SBD-5 Dauntless dive bombers and the TBM-F-1 Avenger. Some 23 American pilots were lost during Operation Hailstone. The planes were missing for 76 years. The steps to finding the aircraft included researching official reports, reading the memoirs of those who were part of Operation Hailstone, and speaking with the residents of the Chuuk state of Micronesia to see what they knew about the planes in the Truk Lagoon. A memoir of one soldier recalled the last location of one of the 2 SBD-5 Dauntless dive bombers, and this gave them an area to begin their search. The search team spent over a year investigating some 27 square miles. Many aircraft broke into fragments, so divers were sent down with high-definition cameras. Once they were able to identify pieces of the 3 planes, they turned everything over to the U.S. Department of Defense's POW/MIA accounting agency. Before we continue, if you're enjoying the video so far, please like and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get back into it. Number 4. Lake Mead, Nevada, Arizona. It was July 1948 when a B-29 crashed into Lake Mead, a body of water that goes from Nevada into Arizona. And sadly, 5 crew members were on board when the plane crashed. A report claimed that the B-29 crashed due to the instruments on the plane being improperly calibrated, but gossip around town said the plane crashed because the pilot was hot-dogging or flying the plane too low as a stunt. Whatever the cause was, the plane hit the water of Lake Mead and then flew another 200 to 300 feet before coming to a rest in the water. 4 of the 5 were able to escape, but 1 was stuck inside the plane. So a couple of crew members went into the water to save the 5th. They were all fine and got into a raft to await help. And eventually they were rescued and returned to base. The B-29 rolled off the assembly line days after Japan surrendered. It was never in combat, but was equipped to be a plane that could research cosmic rays. The plane was at the bottom of Lake Mead until it was discovered by a local diver in 2001. It's still at the bottom of Lake Mead to this day. A Nevada newspaper provided a status on the B-29 in 2021. The aircraft is presently included in the National Register of Historic Places, and the Park Service is actively working towards bestowing it upon the prestigious designation of a National Historic Landmark. This elevated status signifies the recognition of the American people that these places or objects hold significant historical importance. Number 3. Gander Lake, Newfoundland. A B-24 Liberator bomber was discovered in Gander Lake, Newfoundland in 2022. The B-24 with a crew of 4 crashed in 1943, and sadly, everyone on board was killed. The plane had been in the lake for 79 years before it was finally found. A diver with the Royal Canadian Geographical Society said at a depth of approximately 120 feet, they observed the landing gear, which appeared to have fully inflated tires and a somewhat crumpled appearance. However, aside from that, the underwater findings were remarkably well preserved and in incredible condition. The dive wasn't easy because of the color of Gander Lake, which has been described as a tea red. That color absorbs light, which makes any dive a night dive. Rescue efforts were attempted following the wreck, but the crews were apprehensive to recover the wreckage when it was discovered in a deep part of the lake. A rescue team, including people from groups like the Shipwreck Preservation Society of Newfoundland and Labrador, attempted to locate and rescue the plane. They haven't been able to bring it back up to the surface yet, but they have managed to take some images of the wreck. And there are currently plans in place to sell the images to local museums as well as the SPSNL. Number 2. Lake Greenwood, South Carolina. A World War II era B-25 training airplane that was discovered in Lake Greenwood in South Carolina has been on exhibit for the community. Discovered in 1983, the B-25 was restored by the South Carolina Historic Aviation Foundation. And now visitors have a chance to view the plane in person. What we know about the crash of the B-25 is that it was flying too low near Lake Greenwood on June 6, 1944, which also happened to be D-Day. While the plane has been restored, it's by no means flyable. However, there are plans to use it as a centerpiece at a proposed South Carolina museum. And at number 1, loss in the Great Lakes. During World War II, some 200 to 300 aircraft were lost in the Great Lakes, and the majority of those aircraft were lost in Lake Michigan. But why? Lake Michigan was the place where Navy pilots attempted to qualify for carrier takeoffs and landings. It was also a safer location for pilots to train than the Atlantic or Pacific. There were possible threats of enemy attacks, especially submarines, so it was important to protect pilots who were still training and weren't quite combat ready. The Navy even took some older ships and converted them to look like aircraft carriers. There were 2 boats, the USS Wolverine and the USS Sable, which were both kept in the Great Lakes for training needs. Both ships were also decommissioned after World War II. When interviewed by a local radio station in 2021, Ben Page, a museum curator in Wisconsin, said, "There was a tremendous amount of training going on during the Second World War right in Lake Michigan. Roughly 15,000 pilots trained on Lake Michigan alone. And of the 200 to 300 planes that crashed in Lake Michigan, roughly 50 have been rescued, including a Grumman F-4F-3 Wildcat fighter that's currently on exhibit in the EAA Museum in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Some of the planes that crashed were salvaged during the war, while other planes were rescued decades later. The crashes have been attributed to miscalculations by pilots and aircraft mechanical failures. Also, not all of the training action was over Lake Michigan. Another training location was Lake Huron. Lake Huron is the burial spot for several lost Army aircraft. And although it's not a Great Lake, there were Army planes that were also lost in Lake St. Clair, which is south of Lake Huron near Detroit, Michigan, and Windsor, Ontario. The Tuskegee Airmen also did test flights over Lake Huron. The Tuskegee Airmen were the first African-American pilots to serve the United States during World War II. They trained in Alabama at the segregated Tuskegee Army Airfield. Then they went to Michigan to complete more training missions over Lake Huron. These were advanced training missions, and the location in Michigan was perfect because it mirrored the conditions the pilots would face in Europe. Following the completion of the training missions in Michigan, some of the pilots were sent to North Africa and Europe. The rest were transferred to an airbase in South Carolina. One of the locations used in Michigan by the Tuskegee Airmen would be used by French pilots afterward when they were brought to the United States for training. 2 aircraft were lost between 1943 and 1944, but later they were found. They were crashes that occurred during training missions. Both pilots, Lieutenant Frank Moody and Lieutenant Nathaniel Rayberg, were killed during these crashes. Their planes were both Bell P-39Q Air Cobras. Moody's crash was believed to be due to the failure of his machine guns not being properly synced with his propellers. It's been suggested that Moody tried firing his guns, but they damaged the propellers and he crashed. Some of the French pilots who trained at the Great Lakes were also involved in crashes. 5 Republic P-47D Thunderbolts crashed into Lake Huron. One of them was flown by Sergeant François Messinger, but unfortunately he was killed in the accident near Sturgeon Point at Lake Huron. Since the 1980s, there have been multiple attempts by people to locate the missing Michigan planes. Taras Lysenko is one of those people, and his company has assisted in the recovery of 40 aircraft from Lake Michigan. One of those planes, an SBD Dauntless dive bomber, is on exhibit at the Air Zoo near Kalamazoo, Michigan. The Navy has thoroughly researched the aircraft lost in Lake Michigan, and according to them, the collection of aircraft in Lake Michigan stands as the most extensive and exceptionally preserved array of historic U.S. Navy sunken aircraft on a global scale. In historical terms, this assemblage offers a treasure trove of insights into the history of naval aviation. The cool waters of Lake Michigan have allowed the planes to be preserved nicely. and when recovered, some of them were found in surprisingly good shape. If you went looking for abandoned aircraft from World War II, which plane would you be most surprised to find? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.